I'm so glad you chose to be here once again. Just like last time, I want you to find a comfortable spot. Maybe take a deep breath and just give yourself credit for showing up. This work isn't easy, but it is the most important thing we can do. You've been told a beautiful and comforting story your entire life, and it goes something like this. If you are a good person, you will be happy and free. From your earliest days, you learned the rules of this story. You were rewarded with smiles and praise when you fit in, shared your toys, and did as you were told. You were met with frowns or punishment when you were too loud, too different, too focused on your own desires. You learned that being good meant being agreeable, quiet, and putting others first. It meant sacrificing what you wanted for the sake of harmony, silencing your own opinions to avoid conflict, and calling this self-denial kindness. Over the years, this conditioning becomes a part of you. You start to believe that your reluctance to set boundaries is compassion. You mistake your fear of disapproval for humility. You learn to wear the mask of the easygoing, selfless person so well that you forget you're even wearing it. Society loves this version of you. The world is built for the person who follows the script, who doesn't rock the boat, who stays in their lane. It celebrates the predictable, the manageable, the obedient. But it has always been suspicious of the individual who walks off the beaten path, who questions the rules, and who dares to listen to a rhythm that only they can hear. This is why the ideas of a philosopher like Friedrich Nietzsche can feel so unsettling. His work isn't a gentle guide to self-improvement. It's a tremor that shakes the very foundation of what you've been taught about virtue. He doesn't want to make you a better person according to the old rules. He wants you to question the rules themselves. Reading his ideas is like looking in a mirror that doesn't show you what you want to see, but what you are. It reveals that your lifelong quest to be good might have been a performance for an audience that isn't even paying attention. You may have spent so much energy meeting the expectations of others that you've lost the connection to your own authentic self. This isn't a call to embrace cruelty or to become a selfish tyrant. It's an invitation to explore something far more fundamental: the difference between living a life dictated by others and living a life that springs from your own core. Nietzsche saw with terrifying clarity that the morality we are taught is not designed to empower us. It is designed to domesticate us, to make us predictable and easy to manage. Your so-called virtue might just be a well-practiced habit of making yourself smaller, of hiding your true strength behind a shield of social acceptability. And this idea stings because, on some level, you already know it's true. You know there is a part of you that wants to speak up, to create, to live with more passion and intensity. There is a fire in you that you've been taught to dampen, a voice you've learned to silence because you were told it was selfish, arrogant, or dangerous. Nietzsche's philosophy looks you in the eye and suggests that you let it be dangerous. It proposes that true virtue isn't about fitting in. It's about overflowing. It's not about following the map. It's about drawing your own. If you continue down this path of questioning, you may find it impossible to go back to the comfortable sleep of obedience. When Nietzsche famously declared that God is dead, he wasn't trying to pick a fight with religion or be a provocateur. He was making a profound observation about the state of the modern world. He was announcing the collapse of the central pillar that had held up Western civilization's sense of meaning and morality for centuries. The death of God isn't about whether a divine being exists in the heavens. It's about the death of the idea of a single, absolute source of truth. It signals the end of unquestionable commandments and a prepackaged meaning for life handed down from on high. With that foundation gone, what is left? For many, the result is a terrifying emptiness, a feeling of being untethered in a chaotic world without a cosmic rulebook. There is no longer a divine guarantee of what is right and wrong. It is in this gaping void that Nietzsche sees the potential for humanity's next great step, the emergence of what he called the Übermensch, or the Overman. The Overman is not a comic book hero or a ruthless dictator. The Overman is simply a human being who has moved beyond the need for a self-validation and inherited morals. They have become the creator of their own values. They don't live their lives seeking applause or fearing judgment from others, because their sense of worth comes from within. They don't look to the world to give their life meaning. They forge that meaning themselves through their actions, their will, and their creativity. Nietzsche saw humanity as a rope stretched over an abyss, a bridge between the animal and the overman. The tragedy, he believed, is that most people get comfortable on the bridge. They refuse to keep moving forward. They cling to the safety of old beliefs and inherited traditions, becoming prisoners of ideas they never chose. They live to fit into a society that rewards conformity and often punishes genuine self-expression. This is why the journey toward becoming an overman is so difficult and often painful. It requires a form of destruction. You must be willing to burn down the old structures of belief that you have accepted without question. It is a rebirth that can only happen after a symbolic death of the person you thought you were supposed to be. Perhaps you find yourself in that very place right now, standing on that bridge. You might feel the old dogmas no longer fit, the old answers no longer satisfy, yet you're still afraid to let go of the familiar handrails. That fear is normal. It is in this internal struggle that growth happens. But it requires immense courage, the courage to let go of the crutch of a ready-made morality and to start walking without a map. Nietzsche's purpose was not to offer comfort, but to issue a challenge. He tells us that if we want genuine freedom, we must be willing to trade it for security. We have to face the emptiness and build something new from it. But before we can build, we must first recognize the prison we're in, the illusion of an imposed virtue that keeps us small. You have been conditioned to believe that morality is straightforward. Doing good is good, helping others is noble, and following the rules is the right thing to do. But Nietzsche urges you to pull back the curtain and examine what is really driving this so-called goodness. He identified a type of virtue that, while masquerading as noble, is actually a trap. It's a demanding virtue, one that constantly needs to be proven. It paralyzes you with the idea that you must always be sacrificing, always be useful, always be humble. It whispers in your ear that you exist to serve others, and that your own needs are secondary. This virtue dresses itself up as selflessness, but it's fueled by a deep-seated need for approval and recognition. It is this demanding virtue that makes you say yes when your whole being screams no. It turns you into a martyr for causes you don't fully believe in. And then it tells you to be proud of your exhaustion and resentment. Nietzsche saw this as a social mechanism designed to tame the human spirit, not to liberate it. He called it slave morality. He argued that this system of values was invented by the historically weak and oppressed. Lacking the power to achieve what they truly wanted, they reframed their circumstances as a moral choice. They couldn't conquer, so they called meekness good. They couldn't exact revenge, so they preached forgiveness as the highest virtue. They feared the powerful, so they condemned strength and pride as evil. This morality arises from resentment. It's a way of cutting down the strong and celebrating the qualities of the submissive. Think about it. How often does the performance of goodness come with a heavy dose of judgment? The person who is always sacrificing is often the first to notice when others are not. The demanding virtue cannot tolerate the freedom of others because it serves as a painful reminder of its own limitations. It thrives on guilt, control, and the validation that comes from being seen as morally superior. And the most insidious part is that this demanding virtue often becomes your own inner critic. How many times have you felt a surge of guilt for simply wanting a day to yourself? How often have you suppressed a creative impulse or a bold idea for fear of being seen as arrogant or selfish? That is the voice of slave morality. It's the inner warden that insists you live for others, measuring your worth by your utility to the collective, never by your loyalty to your own soul. But Nietzsche presents an alternative. There is another kind of virtue, one that doesn't spring from obligation, guilt, or fear. It isn't built on what you lack, but on what you have in abundance. It is a virtue that gives freely, without demanding anything in return, because the act of giving is its own reward. This is the virtue that Zarathustra, the prophet in Nietzsche's most famous book, comes to teach. It is a virtue that shines like a star, not because it wants to be seen, but because it is its nature to shine. Get ready to explore this overflowing virtue, the one that comes from richness, not from poverty of spirit. In his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche offers a powerful vision of a new kind of morality through the chapter titled "Of the Bestowing Virtue." This isn't just a critique of old ideas, it's a declaration of spiritual independence from a system built on fear and obligation. Zarathustra, having reached a peak of wisdom, speaks of the only virtue he finds truly worthy, the virtue that gives. But this giving is radically different from the charity and self-sacrifice we are usually taught. This virtue doesn't give because a rule commands it, or because it feels guilty, or because it wants to earn praise. It gives simply because it is too full to do otherwise. It overflows. This is the core of the idea. True virtue is a byproduct of inner abundance. Traditional morality is based on lack, on what you shouldn't do, what you must give up, what you are missing. But the bestowing virtue comes from excess. It's the natural, effortless spillover from a soul that has become powerful, rich, and whole. Zarathustra uses the sun as his ultimate metaphor. The sun pours its light and heat onto the world, not because it has a moral duty to do so. It doesn't check to see who is worthy of its warmth. It doesn't ask for gratitude or expect anything in return. The sun shines because it is a massive, overflowing ball of energy. Shining is its nature. This is the ideal Nietzsche proposes for humanity. When a person cultivates their inner strength, their creativity, and their joy to a point of fullness, their goodness becomes just as natural. They no longer need a list of external rules to guide their behavior. Their actions flow directly from their empowered essence. They give because they are free, and this freedom is not about doing whatever you want. It is the freedom of not needing anyone's permission or approval to be your true self. He then delivers a sharp critique to all of us who pride ourselves on our meager, calculated acts of goodness. He says we treat our virtue like a tiny, precious cup that we are afraid to spill. But the contents of that cup are often spoiled by pride and fear. We perform our good deeds hoping someone will notice. We are kind, but only up to a point. The bestowing virtue, in contrast, doesn't need to be put on display. It doesn't need to justify itself or defend its motives, because it doesn't arise from a need at all. It comes from the overflow of a spirit that has become so vast it can no longer be contained. It flows like a great river, as Zarathustra says, and it pours out both good and bad things without distinction, because true, unconditional giving doesn't judge. After sharing this vision, Zarathustra announces his departure. He will return to his solitude, not because he is weak, but because even the most powerful source needs to be replenished. Even the most authentic virtue is not eternal. It is in this embrace of impermanence that its real greatness is found. To know how to give everything, and then to know how to walk away without becoming attached to the results. Now that we have distinguished between the morality of obligation and the virtue of abundance, it's time to go deeper into what it means to live from a place of fullness. This concept is a complete reversal of everything you've likely learned. You were taught that being virtuous is hard work. It requires constant struggle, a fight against your natural impulses, a suppression of your desires, and a swallowing of your pride, all for some abstract greater good. Nietzsche flips this entire model on its head. He argues that genuine virtue is not the result of effort, but the result of excess. It's not built on self-denial. It is built on the complete and total affirmation of your own life and power. Imagine a tree that is so healthy, so deeply rooted, and so well-nourished that it produces an abundance of fruit. The tree doesn't strain to make the fruit. It doesn't agonize over whether the birds are worthy of eating it. The fruit is simply the natural, inevitable outcome of the tree's vitality. This is how Nietzsche sees human virtue. When a person is truly whole, connected to their passions, their strengths, and their creative force, they don't need a reason to be generous or kind. They give because they are overflowing with life. They create because they are filled with inspiration. This kind of giving has no hidden agenda. It's not a strategy for being liked or a way to build a reputation. It simply happens, as naturally as an artist creates art or a river flows to the sea. This requires a profound shift in how you see yourself. If you still believe that you have to try really hard to be a good person, you are still operating from a place of lack. You are still trapped in the old model. When your being is truly full, your actions are not born from a sense of duty, but from your very nature. Nietzsche is proposing an ideal for a human being who is not motivated by fear of punishment or hope for reward. This person doesn't submit to old traditions, but they also don't waste their energy in childish rebellion against them. They have simply outgrown them. They are the creator, the one who gives because they are free, who acts because they are whole, and who shines without ever needing an audience. You might feel a sense of discomfort with this idea. You might be realizing just how much of what you call goodness is actually an attempt to please others, to protect yourself, or to avoid rejection. That is a perfectly normal realization. Most of us are conditioned this way. But the awareness itself is the crucial first step toward real transformation. The virtue that gives is not a set of behaviors to imitate. It is a state of being to cultivate. And this state only becomes possible when you let go of the idea that you have to earn your right to exist. It happens when you finally understand that you have nothing to prove and that you don't need anyone's permission to be who you are. No matter how pure or powerful, no virtue can escape the fundamental law of existence. Everything is impermanent. Everything that is born must eventually die. Every flower that blooms will one day wither. Unlike many philosophers who try to shield us from this truth, Nietzsche thrusts us right into it. He believes that true freedom is found not in avoiding this reality, but in embracing it with open arms. After Zarathustra has given all of his wisdom, he understands that his own virtue, this great overflowing power, must also have its cycle. It too must die, and he feels no sadness or despair in this. He sees beauty, wisdom, and the natural rhythm of life. The true creator understands when it is time to stop. They know that constant, unending output is not sustainable. Even the sun must set. Nietzsche doesn't want you to become a mindless giving machine. He wants you to learn the dance of existence, to know how to shine brightly when you are full, but also how to gracefully withdraw when you feel yourself becoming empty. The soul that gives also needs to be renewed. It needs to return to its source. It needs a symbolic death in order to be reborn, stronger, clearer, and more authentic. This cycle is not a sign of weakness. It is a fundamental right of all living things. The Creator is not a servant to the world, obligated to give until they are completely depleted. They give from their wholeness. When they feel that wholeness beginning to wane, they retreat. They seek silence. They disappear. They do this because they understand that even giving, when it becomes a compulsion, becomes toxic. It can turn into an addiction, a need to be needed, a way of avoiding one's own inner world. And this brings us to one of the most profound lessons. Knowing how to give is a great strength, but knowing when to stop giving is an even rarer wisdom. The ego wants to make everything permanent. It wants our achievements and our virtues to be recognized, applauded, and remembered forever. But the free spirit knows this is a trap. It knows that everything true and alive must change, flow, and eventually make way for something new to be born. Zarathustra doesn't even cling to his own teachings. He wants his words to be like a river that nourishes the land and then moves on, never stagnating or seeking to be glorified. This is a powerful invitation to look at our own lives. What are you desperately trying to keep alive that has already served its purpose? It could be an old identity, a finished relationship, a career path that no longer inspires you, or even just a way of thinking that you have outgrown. Nietzsche challenges you to practice the art of letting go. This kind of detachment requires something our culture has almost forgotten: inner silence. It requires the ability to step back from the noise of the world, to return to yourself, and to understand that the spirit that gives must also take time to receive. This is exactly what Zarathustra does. He departs into solitude, not as an escape, but as an act of rebirth. It is in this creative silence that true strength is rebuilt. Zarathustra falls silent, and in his silence there is a powerful message. It is a message of freedom, maturity, and profound detachment. After giving everything he had to give, he makes the conscious choice to leave. This is not an act of weakness or surrender. It is the act of someone who knows that even the brightest light must sometimes dim in order to gather the energy to shine at its full potential once again. This voluntary withdrawal speaks more about true strength than any loud display of power ever could. Nietzsche understood a truth that most of us find difficult to accept. No one can sustain a state of infinite giving without eventually breaking. The soul that constantly offers itself without pausing to recharge becomes drained, bitter, and resentful. This is why the authentic creator, the truly strong individual, knows how to retreat. They don't have a desperate need for the stage or the applause of the crowd. What they need is a connection to their own deep inner source, and that source is almost always found in stillness. Our modern culture, however, is terrified of emptiness. We are conditioned to despise silence and value constant noise, performance, and self-promotion. The world wants you to be always on, always available, always productive. If you dare to fall silent, you risk being forgotten. If you withdraw to preserve your energy, you may be judged as lazy or selfish. But Nietzsche presents another way, the path of conscious solitude. It is the disappearance that heals, the absence that regenerates. Zarathustra retreats because he has given everything he could give in that moment. If you feel a similar sense of depletion, if you feel you have nothing left to offer the world right now, that you need space, quiet, and darkness, then perhaps this is your signal to follow his example. It is not an act of giving up, but an act of profound wisdom. True, generous giving can only happen when there is a full wellspring to draw from. And here lies the most crucial lesson for today. Do not be afraid to disappear for a while. Give yourself permission to turn off the world, to silence the external voices, and to listen only to what is stirring inside of you, even if what you hear is uncomfortable at first. It is in this restorative silence that your real power resides. It is there you will learn that you do not need to be constantly useful to be valuable. You have worth even when you are not doing. You matter even when you are silent. It's a commitment to your own well-being, a recognition that the silence is what rebuilds you, preparing you for the next time you are ready to overflow. This journey isn't about achieving perfection, but about embracing your true self. It's about finding your way back home to who you are, stepping out of any limitations, and finally recognizing the warmth and light of your own inherent worth. You deserve this. You always have. Thanks for watching. If this resonated, please like this video and subscribe to stay updated. I look forward to continuing this journey with you. Until next time, take care and be present.